Hey everybody, welcome back to So You Want to Be in Ministry. I'm Tim, and we are all about getting you to the finish line that God has put in front of you. We try to do that through educating you if you're thinking about jumping in, equipping you if you're already in, and encouraging you if you're just discouraged and thinking about jumping out. We want to be a resource for you to just keep going, make it to that next day, make it to that next week, and keep pursuing after what God has put in front of you. Today, we are going to be having a conversation with my wife, and we're going to really focus on some of the things that we had to navigate early in our ministry career and just as a pastor's wife. And I wanted her to be able to share some of her story, because being a pastor's wife and the spouse of a church staff member, it is kind of unique. It's a little bit different because the church world's a little bit different. Maybe you've already experienced that. Maybe you haven't. But we wanted to talk through some of the things that we've experienced. What we've experienced is not true of everyone. Sometimes some of the stories that we shared, sometimes it's worse. And sometimes it's like, oh, I've never really experienced that before. But we wanted to give at least some. And I wanted to give my wife an opportunity to talk about that a little bit. And she was willing to. So let's get into it. And here's Rachel Weihrauch with the interview about being a spouse of a pastor. Well, hey there. We're doing this podcast interview together.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we both fit on screen, apparently. I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. It worked out okay.
We're making it work.
We're making it work. So I was very excited that you said you were willing to be on here. I was a little bit surprised you were willing to be on here, too. So we're jumping in. Why don't you tell everybody kind of your story of how you ended up in ministry with me?
When I was in high school, I had a pastor's wife who really took me under her wing. I had piano lessons at her house. She did some Bible studies for the younger girls. It was like then I decided like I really wanted to be like her. I felt like God was calling me to be a pastor's wife. My junior year of high school, I visited a few colleges, Faith Baptist Bible College, Cedarville, and
Was it Summit?
it was Baptist Bible College, but it's Summit University now.
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
I decided I really liked the smaller atmosphere of faith. I was there with my group. You were there.
I was. Just if you don't know, I was a junior in college when she shows up to check out colleges. So yeah, that was.
I wasn't interested until the end of the weekend. We looked you up in the photo book. What do we call that? The hog log?
Yeah, we did call it the hog log.
I don't even know how I got one because I wasn't a student there. And it said that Tim wanted to be a pastor. I knew that's what I wanted to be. And that's the story, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, so she didn't say it, but she 100% asked me out, like to be boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever it was at the time. It was several decades ago.
I didn't really ask you out. I just let you know I was interested.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, it was. I had grown gun shy. Too many girls had taken a pass on Tim, and so my sisters let her. She's good friends with my sister too. They let her know, hey, Tim does like you, but you're gonna have to tell him, and she did, and so here we are. Yeah. So walk us through a little bit further. Like, what was it like early in marriage? Because we did jump into ministry fairly early after getting married, and so after getting married, like, what were the emotions and things you were walking through going from married life, very new? We were, for all intents and purposes, we were newlyweds.
They always say that the first year was the hardest, and I thought it was the easiest. Like, I feel like we both went to work. We went to the movies a lot. We went to the mall.
Yep.
We did try to get into ministry, fairly small church. Weren't gonna pay us a whole lot, and tried to get jobs there, and it just didn't work out. And so we were like, let's just wait. And then we heard of a church closer to my family, and then we went there and
Mm-hmm.
took a really significant pay cut to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We struggled a lot that year. I always tell Tim that we, I just thank God for like, he blessed us that year, and the fact like nothing, our car didn't break down. We always seem to have enough to get us by. But other than that, that was a really big struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then during that time, I worked at a different church as a secretary, and Tim was looking for a different job. And the lady there was like, "Oh, I have a neighbor who says their church needs a youth pastor." And so, like, the rest was history after that.
Yep.
And we stayed there for nine years.
Yep. Just it was almost 10. We were just shy of 10 years. Yeah.
And toward the end, like, there were a few times where we were like, I don't know if this is where we're supposed to be. But we kind of had an interim in the middle of while we were there, and we got a new pastor. And I told Tim, I was like, we need to stay. I want to see what he's gonna do at the church. And that's when I think you grew a ton. So I am glad we stayed. And toward the end of when we were there, that's when our daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of already like, maybe it's time to go. But I felt like after that, it was definitely, it was time for you to spread your wings and do something a little more
Stretching
than what we were.
Yeah.
But also, like, we needed to be able to provide for our family,
Yep.
in a different way.
So you talked about you looked up to this pastor's wife, and it kind of started stirring that inside of you. I would even say Holy Spirit stirring that inside of you about full-time ministry, and that could potentially be your future, at least on a spouse level. Did you have any visions of grandeur going into ministry where you're like, oh, we're going to go in? Like, did you have this picture and this vision of how this was all going to look? And then how did that turn out?
I don't know if I had any visions of grandeur, but I definitely wasn't expecting that first year of like, not like, I felt like we were barely surviving. Like, I remember one time, like, I don't know what you would call him, but the guy who wrote the paychecks at
The
the
treasurer.
church, or
Yeah.
he came up to me, and he, like, we got paid weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and he came up to me one time, he's like, why don't you deposit your check? Like, why do you always wait? And I was like, well, I usually wait 2 weeks because it feels like I'm putting more money into the bank.
I forgot about that.
So I wasn't expecting that, and I wasn't expecting, like, the associate pastor there really took us under his wing and was like, they fed us from their table, or if we got food out, they'd be like, oh, just get something small or whatever, like, for us, like, we'd pay for it, and then they provided the rest. Like, we get like tacos from Taco Bell, which weren't very expensive.
Almost every Sunday night that would happen, right? It was Sunday night?
Yeah, almost every Sunday night. And then things happened at the church. They ended up leaving, and I know it was a rough circumstance for them, and they ended up giving us money to help us pay for our insurance.
I know they're going through a really rough time, and they're still helping us. It was pretty wild.
So it's just, being on staff can be a very humbling experience, and it's also like just to see how people help out is amazing.
Yeah, one lesson, I think you this may be true for you too, but one lesson I had to learn early on was to accept a gift and say thank you.
I think that's what
He
he
did that. Our
is.
associate pastor would he would say that he'd go, Tim, just take it and say thank you. And he's like, you need to learn to just it's okay to get some help from other people. And I had to do that over and over. And now when somebody is just like, hey, we want to help you, and I tend to just kind of go, uh, thank you, and accept it. And that heavily comes from what he told me at that point. Yeah. How do you go about as a pastor's wife? How do you go about developing relationships and friendships within the church? Because like if I ended up moving to a different church, like you're navigating that where you just maybe you lost friendships, maybe like it's kind of I know it's got to be a little bit difficult. Like how do you navigate that?
So I would say I am well, the younger I was, I felt like I was more of a shy person. Like I really don't like even now, like when we go to the store and I have a question, like I'll make one of our kids go find a worker and ask me because I just don't want to do it. Uh
Just so you can understand why I'm amazed she's doing this right now, okay? Based off that answer. Okay, go ahead.
um but I feel like being in ministry, it's hard to have friends because you can't share like what's on your heart and you can't share all the time what is going on.
And I would say you have to be careful what you share. It doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can't, but you do have to be careful. Yeah.
So I would say probably at any church I really only had maybe like one really good friend that I could talk to. Um and they've all been great, amazing people. I love them all. Um it's just really hard to have.
How do you pick out if this is a person I can trust? Like, because trust has to develop. How do you figure that out?
So probably our first church and the church we're at now, probably my friends I talk to the most were on staff. So you
Okay.
can usually trust people that are, if you're on a staff with them, because they're already gonna know all the things anyway.
Mm-hmm.
My the church we were at in the middle, she's just amazing. I
Yeah.
just love her.
Yeah. There was definitely one friend that proved trustworthy.
Yes.
Could you describe some of the characteristics or maybe the events that you walk through with her that go, I can trust
Well,
her?
I served with her. We did in Awana clubs. I served with her through that. We both made it a point to like her kid, her oldest has severe food allergies, and I also helped in the nursery. So I tried to be very careful with him, make sure he was not eating what he shouldn't, and we had stuff that he could eat. And she would do the same for our like girls because her girls are pretty similar age to them. Like I think her youngest and my oldest were they're either the same age or a year apart.
Mm-hmm.
So just working with her like that, um, you can trust somebody usually.
You probably have like little moments where you're like, like I know one thing for me is I'll do a little bit of testing where I'll give somebody something where I'm a little bit uncomfortable that
Mm-hmm.
I told it to them, but not so uncomfortable if it got out, it would be devastating. And then when nobody hears of it, I'm like, okay, this is somebody I can actually trust to kind of talk to. And so then I might go a little bit further with some vulnerability the next time. And as they keep proving themselves, eventually I just start saying whatever. Like it becomes very natural just talking, just go, hey, this isn't something to share, but this is it. And I'm trying to navigate this. Yeah.
I mean, I have friends outside of the church.
Mm-hmm.
This year is the first year I've really worked in the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
I was stay at home mom.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it even harder to find friends. But now like I have friends at work
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, just I'm kind of introverted. Like, I don't love to go out and do stuff with,
You t-
like,
yeah, you tend to have closer, deeper relationships with fewer people. Like you'll be friendly with everyone
yeah.
or most everyone, that you come in contact with, but you'll have really deep, close relationships with like a select few or a smaller group. Yeah. Okay. Um, what should so you're a spouse of a pastor. You've been a spouse of a pastor for close to 20 years, if you can believe that.
I'm
What?
not that old.
Yeah, what? It's
I'm
still
really
20.
24.
No, you're not. You're not. Um, what could you tell other spouses? So maybe their husband's getting ready to jump in and be a pastor. Maybe their wife is looking at jumping onto a church staff, like whatever. What should they expect as a spouse? Like what should they be watching their spouse walk through? What's the expectations?
Church is a very eye-opening experience. Like, you feel like you're going to go into church, everybody wants to serve God, and you get there and people have their own agendas. People just want to, like, be there to make trouble.
Sometimes
Like troublemakers. Like we're all in junior high or something.
can be that way sometimes.
Um you really have to, I don't know, it's like you got to guard your heart, but
Okay.
you want to be open
Hmm.
to people too. Like,
So let's take two different sides then. How would you encourage them to support their spouse that's on the church staff or that is the pastor?
I feel like knowing when you need to tell your spouse what you hear, because
Okay.
people will come up to you and complain about your spouse. Like, hello. Like,
Do you know? Do you know who you're
I'm his
talking?
wife.
Yeah.
Like, why are we talking about this? Like, I'm always gonna be his number one fan.
Yeah.
So you really gotta watch that, and then if you hear something that they need to know, like, yes, you need to tell them what is going on because they might not be hearing it.
Yeah, and that can be positive and negative. So it could be
Yeah.
negative, like feedback, where it's like, "Hey, this is something you need to be aware of because it's out there." But it could be positive too, where it's like, "Hey, you might want to check in on so and so because they're like where that's happened several times. Where I'm like, I didn't even know that they were in the hospital, or I didn't
Hmm.
know, like, and you heard it, but I didn't, and so you've supported me in that role."
Or like giving them the gentle nudge when they need to do stuff. Like, um, we had a woman here at our church that had a medical emergency, and her husband called at night, and you didn't want to answer the phone because it's past work hours.
It
And I'm
wasn't just
like,
past work
yeah,
hours.
it was pretty late.
It
It
was
was,
it was almost past bedtime hours.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I feel like you need to answer that call, and I'm really glad you did,
Yeah,
because
I'm really glad you nudged me because it was absolutely necessary. Yeah, so
like,
that's another good one. Yeah.
just being like, ministry feels like it's 24/7.
Hmm.
You don't really get a whole lot of breaks, and like sometimes that's the reminder, like, we work all the time, like, people need you, people need us. So
So there's the expectation and how you step in and support, but how do you? What should be the expectation from the church? Like you're coming in, what kind of things should a spouse of a church staff member or pastor expect to happen from the church?
well, I don't think, my personal opinion, you need to ask questions and be like, are you wanting a 2-for-1 deal? Because that's that shouldn't be happening if they're just paying your spouse.
So you're saying 2-for-1 deal.
Yes. Like,
Two of us are basically going to be church staff members, but you're
yeah.
only
Like,
actually
are you going to
paying
play
one of us.
piano?
Okay.
Are you going to run a ministry?
Okay.
Um Things like that. Like,
So on that level, what is a fair expectation then from a church?
I feel like the pastor's wife, spouse, um, obviously they should be expected to serve, um, just like any other member.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to know, like, the spouse does stuff behind the scenes that people don't see. Like, I always tell you, like, my ministry should be like being your sounding board because that takes up a lot of time sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to be there and be an encouragement to your spouse. So I don't think the church sees that a whole lot, but we spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
Just that.
Yeah. So most likely she's the first person that's heard what's in my head after I've externally processed it with myself.
He talks to himself.
Yeah, yeah. I just recently preached a message where I shared that my oldest daughter, she tells on me, but she said it, if you get up early in the morning and you listen really closely, you can hear Dad arguing with himself.
It's true.
Yeah, I I knew it was true. I did not realize she could hear me, but she told on me, and but that's true. Like after I kind of process with myself, I tend to come to you and be like, "Hey, I need to bounce something off of you." And I don't do everything. There's things that I do kind of keep to myself because I don't want to burden you with it. But then there's other things where I really do need someone to process it with. Yeah.
I think the church needs to realize, like, I mean, there's different seasons of life, but you can't expect the same amount of time out of the spouse as you do the person that you're paying.
Mm-hmm.
Because behind the scenes, like, sometimes you're gone a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the one at home taking care of all the kids. Like, I feel like that's one of my main things too, is like, I don't want my kids to be like the side, like, I don't know, like, the church doesn't come first in their eyes. Like,
Yep.
there's somebody here to take care of them.
Yes. Yep. All right. What is your role to your spouse, like, and or your family?
To you, I mean, I've talked about this, just being your sounding board, being
Mm-hmm.
here for you,
Mm-hmm.
being your encourager, your number one fan.
Mm-hmm. And just to talk about that, she is. I do think you need to be very encouraging because oftentimes it can be naturally discouraging, not because people may even be blasting you or something. It's just like you're carrying the weight of a lot of people, the burdens that they're carrying, and you're trying to shepherd them and care for them. And so you do need a lot of encouragement. And I would say you just said something else that triggered something for me. Um,
Number one fan.
Number one, yeah. So number one fan, but with realism in mind, like not over the top, where it's like you can do no wrong. Like there's plenty of
Yeah.
times where you're like that wasn't great, like you didn't do
But
great
you
with
can still be a fan.
it. Correct. Like
And no, they're gonna screw up every
yeah,
once in a while.
yep. And you let me know.
Hmm.
That's probably another help that you give me is you're like, that wasn't okay. You need to go address that.
But as my role as our family, I mean, that has shifted a little bit this year with me going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, I stayed at home with the kids, and it's a struggle to work on a one income family.
Yeah, it can be.
And
We chose to sacrifice for other reasons, and
yes, and with Abel being autistic, especially before he was diagnosed, he had a lot of therapies that came to the house, which I'm so thankful they came to the house. But that was a lot in itself, like people being here every day, him taking care of him, taking care of the girls.
so you've shared our oldest has an autoimmune disease. She has type 1
Emily has
diabetes.
type 1 diabetes. Ayla is just a handful.
She's she's the go-getter. She's the pistol. She She does a lot of really cool things, but she's a pistol.
She's not my personality. That's
Yeah.
probably why we clash a little bit. But
And then Abel.
and Abel is autistic. He's great. It
S-
was a struggle.
yeah.
The older he gets, the better life gets.
Mhm.
He's able to communicate better, um, take care of his own needs, stuff like that.
With that, how have you seen, because we've been in two different churches, with that being true, how have you seen the church respond to one of their pastors and one of their church staff families having really tough special needs situations and
I
navigating them
feel
with
like it's not fair to the first church because we weren't there very
Mhm.
long after Amelie was diagnosed. And Abel was still a baby and he wasn't acting any
Yep.
different. Like I never noticed anything while we were there. The church we're at now is great. Like I mean, we have two campuses and I feel like even taking him to the other campus, he still does really great. The
Mhm.
workers there love him. Like I don't even know these people and they love on him. He I've never been called that he's having a meltdown. Especially our campus, they go out of their way for Abel. Like they put him in the classes they feel like he can handle. They push him.
Yeah.
They push him to do other things like the other kids, and eventually
It clicked.
he's a little stubborn, but he'll get to it.
So what would you say if there's a family out there that does have special needs situations? What are just like one or two things that you would recommend, like especially if they're looking for a church? What are one or two things that you would just say, look for this in the heartbeat of the church to know that they're gonna help out with your family? Or support you. Probably not help out, but just support you in what you're
Like
going through.
just visiting church or like going there to work.
Going like you're gonna take a position there, yeah.
I mean, I'd really talk with the people that work in the kids' ministries just to get a feel for what they do. Some churches have special needs
Hmm.
ministries. We don't really, but we've had some other kids with special needs
Hmm.
that we are always willing to accommodate.
Yep.
Um, Whether it's just having someone back there extra, um, if they need to stay back from like loud areas, things like that. Maybe ask them what kind of play equipment, things like that, because Abel really loves army guys, and those have followed him through every room
Yeah.
so far at our church.
Yep.
Um, just things like that.
Okay. What are some red flags? So if you're a spouse walking in, your spouse is going through the church interview process. Maybe you're not in there because they're hiring your husband or wife, and so you're not really in the interview process until maybe the very very end where you're just like getting to know somebody. Maybe go out to lunch or something. How do you navigate that to kind of catch some red flags where you're like, did you notice this? Did you pay attention to this? Did you hear him say this? Like, how do you know, or what are some red flags where that would instantly kind of shoot something up at you?
Um, Definitely, if it doesn't feel like a church you would be at, that would be
Explain
a
that a
red
little
flag.
bit.
Everyone's different. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, the church we have now is very pretty contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, some people just, they don't like that. They like traditional. So,
Yep.
like, that could be a red flag. Like, if you're a very traditional person going to a church like that,
Okay.
you might not feel comfortable with it. They might get a weird vibe from you.
So make sure that whatever church you're going to fits your family. Like this
Yeah,
is the
like,
environment we would want to be in. Okay.
yes.
All right. What's another red flag?
Well, one of the very first church you and I interviewed at, we weren't even married yet.
Mm-hmm.
And We went to the pastor before we interviewed with the elders and we're like, what do we need to know? Like, how should we dress? And he's like, oh, it's very casual, laid back, whatever. So we both show up. We have like jeans on. I wore a button down top.
I had a
And then,
polo on.
yeah, and we left, and all the feedback was they didn't like the way we dressed. They didn't like the way I was sitting, which I was just like usually across my leg, like under
Yeah.
my leg.
Yep.
And I'm like, that, no. Like,
So
if we're going to nitpick that much, like, it's probably not where we want to be.
yeah, so the red flag for you was just like a hyper criticism.
Yeah,
At
like
least
it
for
was just
us.
way too over the top for
Yeah.
something that like I was still in college.
Yeah.
Like I was 19.
Were you?
Yes, I was 19.
Wow.
Conservative college, like I
Yeah.
wasn't wearing something out there
Yeah.
or
Yeah, it's still what's shocking to me. I didn't like now I'm realizing you were 19, and after 2 decades of ministry, I'm realizing what that must have looked like. So I just kind of had a picture in my own head with all that. So, any other red flags that might?
doctrinal things,
Okay,
make
so
sure you
yeah.
align with the doctrine.
All right. So those are some red flags that you've had show up or that you paid attention to or maybe even learned from. What about what has become important to you? So like as we have looked for another church, what have you like gone it's important that this is true about this next church. What are some of those things?
Well, I would love for them to love my children, would be a big one. They need to learn and grow just as much as anybody else. Um, I do appreciate the church we're at right now and how everybody just feels welcome. Like
Mm.
sometimes you can go to church and people don't want to set foot in the door because they feel like their sin is just on them and everybody sees that and is going to judge them for that. And our church doesn't like shy away from being like, if you are a Christian, yes, there's things you do need to work on. But like just the average Joe walking through the door, I feel like everybody is very friendly and loving and wants them to be there. Like they want
Yeah.
them to learn and to grow. And whether that's accepting Jesus as their savior or just taking the next step in their walk with Jesus, I feel like a, we have a ton of cheerleaders at our church.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say there's definitely an atmosphere of grace, like immediately, where um, I've seen multiple times where people just messed up, and it could be small, it could be big, and there's an atmosphere of grace where we're gonna move forward. We expect to move forward, but there's also like, okay, like
I think
you're
I
part
would
of us.
expect that grace to extend to you as well as their pastor. Like, you are, they look up to you, but you shouldn't just be put on a pedestal. And if you fall down, like some churches are like, you're done. But I think the church we're at right now is very grace filled
Mm-hmm.
towards you as well.
I think so too. Is there anything else?
I do, this is just my own personal preference,
Yeah.
but I do appreciate we're more contemporary, a little bit more out there. It just reminds me of like when we were in college and our college ministry. Like I feel like that is just extended to everybody, and I appreciate that, but I know a lot of people do
It fits
prefer,
us. Yeah.
yeah, it fits us.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you want traditional church, go for it. Like if that's what you are looking for, look for that.
Yeah, whatever's gonna support your family to keep growing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Make sure it's an atmosphere where you can thrive and be comfortable, um, comfortable in the right way. Like I think if God's working on you, you're always going to be a little bit uncomfortable because you're getting stretched and you're growing and stuff. But there's also a comfortability in the area.
I feel
Yeah,
like at our church now I can be myself.
yeah.
Like
That I you just said what
I
I
can
was trying to. Yeah.
dress the way, like, I've been to churches before that are like, why aren't you wearing a dress this week? I'm sorry. I wore a dress every day in college. Like, I was a little over it by then. Um, I have blue
I was gonna
hair.
say
I
blue hair.
mean,
That's a
not
pretty obvious one.
some people have like said not nothing negative, but just in passing, but that's fine with me. Like
Yeah.
I can be myself. I can wear what I feel comfortable wearing. Um my kids don't like nobody's there to judge my kids. Pastors' kids can get a bad rap for things, and
I would say that they are not held to a standard
you
that any
know,
other.
and I don't think I'm held
Yeah,
to a standard either.
I don't think so either. Mm-mm.
So,
Right. And I would say that I'm not held to an unrealistic standard outside of any other pastor that's within our church or maybe even within our area. Like there's a certain level of leadership ability you have to have as a pastor. And I think I'm held to that standard, but I don't think it's unrealistic
hmm
either. Yeah. Okay. What about self care? How would you encourage them to take care of themselves?
so self care is my favorite, and I believe that everybody should be practicing some form of self care. I remember when I think it was like right after I had Abel, it was possibly right after Amelie got diagnosed with diabetes. Um, I just remember doing all the things like worrying about her, not sleeping at night, um, taking care of a newborn and a diabetic's like taking care of a newborn, especially when they're first newly diagnosed. I remember one day just going in the bathroom and shutting the door and taking a bath, and I'm just like it was just like that. Like I remember crying in the bathtub. I remember it's so important to take care of yourself because you can't take care of other people. Like
Yeah.
you can for a while, but you run out of gas.
So give like two or three things that doesn't matter if they're man or woman, but two or three things that maybe they could do to help them start thinking through like how do I take care of myself? Because there could be some that are listening to this that this is gonna be their first ministry, so they don't even know what they're about to walk into really.
So I would take a self evaluation and be like, what do I enjoy doing? What fills my cup? What brings me joy? Um, what brings me peace? Like some of the things I enjoy doing, which not everyone's gonna like this, but I take a bath almost every night.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm in the bath, I read a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to mix it up. I read fiction, I read nonfiction, Bible related books, um, just so I can get that wide
Yeah.
array of
Do you
stuff.
do anything else for self care? So you got that one. Just to give ideas, like this may be true for them, may not be true, but just give
Um,
ideas.
well, so recently, since I started a new job, I mean, not everybody has the money to spend on things, but I
Mm-hmm.
do love um skincare, clothes. You have gotten me a subscription box for Christmas the last several years,
Mm-hmm.
which helps me to be able to like try new products.
Mm-hmm.
But I know like a lot of people can't afford those things. So like if you don't have the budget, like if you love to read, go to the library. Or if you can't get a gym membership, find a walking trail. Like we have the greatest walking trail by our house. Like 1 year, that's all I did was walk and walk and walk. And it was, it was really good for me. Stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, some of the things that I do run. I enjoy jelly beans. So like to me that's kind of self-care where I'm just going to indulge a little bit in some jelly beans. What's something else I do? I play video games, and so that surprises people sometimes, but there are times like I get things in my head and I have to do things that just help it like work out of my brain, and video games in a weird way just helps me work things out. And so does running. Both of those things kind of help me work it out. So yeah,
I
those are a
mean,
couple
I
things.
think too, like, I know, like, being a pastor, like, the majority of them don't make a lot of money. So finding, like, if you put in a little bit of effort, you can find things. Like, if you enjoy spending time with your kids, look for those, like, free bowling, or, like, our town has free older movies during
Hmm.
the summer, or free swim day. And, like, it's not like you're not going to go swimming all day, but it's just enough, like,
Yeah.
and you get to make memories and not spend any money.
Yep.
So just, I appreciate self-care.
I know you do. All right. How do you? Is there? Do you do anything like you don't take yourself very seriously? Like you do have fun in life. You do have fun with your friends. You do have fun with ministry and as a family. How do you keep yourself from taking yourself too seriously?
I love to joke around. I love to be sarcastic. Um, I love spending time with my parents,
Hmm.
which my mom definitely loves to joke around and
Hmm.
be a little sarcastic. So I just try to be around things and people that are going to appreciate that, or they're not going to, like, bring you down and just make you, like, be serious. And, like,
Okay.
obviously you have to be serious and get your work done and things like that, but I mean, you only get one life and it should be fun.
What is one tool or piece of knowledge or wisdom or whatever? Fill in the blank. What's one thing that you wish you had from the beginning? So you jumped in. You were 21 when we went to our first church, right? Yeah. So you were very young. What's one thing, like if you could go back almost 2 decades to your 21-year-old self and go, you need this when you jump into ministry? What would that thing be?
I feel like it would be to, like, just trust your instincts. Like, God put something on in your heart and your life. And there's, like, I mean, our first church, I had someone come up to me because I only work part-time at a church. And, like, our goal as a married couple was, like, was eventually, we were going to have kids and I was going to stay home.
Hmm.
And I remember someone coming up to me and just being like, that's not how it works. Like, your husband's in ministry, he's probably not going to make a lot of money. You're going to have to work, you're going to have to provide insurance. And I'm like, no, God did not call me to that. Like, he called me to be a mother one day. And we agreed, like, I was gonna stay home. And I know that's not for everybody, but that's what God laid on our hearts. So, like, there's gonna be a lot of negative people just saying things to you, and if that's not God's calling on your life, just let it go. Like,
Yeah, it may not be that you have to leave it, just but you do have to let it go and just go. That's not for
and
us. Yeah.
sometimes it's just seasons too. Like, yes, I was a stay-at-home mom and I am working now, but, like, God put it on my heart real randomly, like maybe I should just be a school cook. Like I work the same hours, the kids are at school, I'll have summers off. And it actually, like, it happened.
Yep.
And crazy, like as soon as Abel got into kindergarten, the
Lunch lady.
sub job was up and I signed up to sub. So
Yep.
um just God just uses, he places stuff on your heart. Don't let people talk you out of it.
No. You're the cutest lunch lady that I've ever seen. So that's just me. That's me though.
Okay.
Yeah. What are one or two books or more? Because I know you have more.
Okay.
What are several books that you would recommend for spouses of church staff or pastors?
So I read a large variety of books. I try to keep them like nonfiction, things like that, fiction books. I try to keep very clean. I'm not gonna be reading anything
Yeah. Crazy.
questionable. But I did have some.
Show them off. Yeah.
So some of these are older, and some of them are newer.
You're allowed. Both those.
Lisa TerKeurst, It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. I'm very drawn to, especially women who have been through a lot in life.
Yep.
Like, you can learn a lot from people that have walked through those really crazy storms. Like, and that's what I needed in the moment. Like, with 2 kids being diagnosed with 2 different things in a span of 2 years, it was a lot on us. Especially like you went through some depression right after Abel was diagnosed. I feel like I have experienced depression on and off. I feel like I was depressed while you were depressed, but somebody had to keep the family going, and that's probably the reason I got out of bed every day.
Yep.
One time while I was depressed, a couple years back, I read A Love Worth Giving by Max Lucado, and he just goes through the love chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you, I was like, Max's writing just feels like a warm hug.
Yep.
Like this had nothing to do with like depression or anxiety or whatever. It's just talking about love and God's love, and I'm like, this was a great book to have. This one I read last year, Suffering is Never for Nothing, Elizabeth Elliot. She went through a lot in her life. She had 2 husbands that passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And then last fall, I really went through a bout of depression, probably the worst I've ever had. And it was just, I feel like I was being gaslit to some level. And so you kept telling me to read this book. It's Soundtracks by John Acuff.
Yep.
Because I was believing things that other people were perceiving of me or telling me that I was.
Yep.
And I was starting to believe them. And you were like, that's not who you are. And like this book talks about that, and like getting rid of the broken soundtracks in our life and putting positive ones, like saying affirmations in the morning, just doing different things throughout your day to show that you can do these certain things.
One of my favorite,
a really great book.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes of John is not in this book; it's in a different book, but it carries out that idea in this book. But one of my favorite quotes of him is, "I'm sorry, I don't live up to the made-up rules you've created for other people." And it's like, I use that a lot, where it's like, I mean, why is that a rule? Well, because I think that's how it should be. Well, I'm sorry, I don't live up to the made-up rules you've created for other people. Like, you can create that rule for yourself if you want to, but don't hold me to a made-up standard. Like, if it's a God standard, okay, that's in Scripture, but it's a made-up thing. Don't hold me to that. So, Like that's a rule you made. That's side note. That's why baseball can be frustrating. Made up rules, like just unwritten rules. All right. What would you say to encourage those that may be struggling? So it could be a spouse that's watching their husband or wife walk through a very difficult season in ministry right now, or maybe they are just being in the ministry setting that they're in. What's a piece of encouragement you could give them?
Just keep walking and keep getting up every day. During that time that you were very depressed, it was very hard to watch. I felt like I was depressed, but I kept getting up every day. I kept praying for you. I kept trying to find solution. And usually you can find one. But sometimes it's not what you were expecting. Um like when you were depressed, we tried all the things like counseling,
Reading books, watching different videos.
and it was the one most random thing, like talking to your person that does like personality tests
Yep.
for church, that like instantly snapped you out of it.
Yep.
And just keep looking for those solutions, because I mean, God's always with us.
Mhm.
And like things are temporary, and sometimes they're forever and sometimes they're not. I mean, Amelie's always gonna have diabetes, and
Until she gets until she
yes,
figures out a cure.
but it's gotten so much better.
Yeah.
As you, with time,
Yeah.
walking the path.
Hindsight, you got a little bit of
Yeah.
hindsight behind you where you can kind of see how those things came together for you. Yeah. Any last words? I think that's all I've got for questions. Anything you'd like to say to wrap up our time?
I just feel like being a pastor's wife is very rewarding. Like, I mean, I serve at our church. I would say I definitely don't do nearly as much as you do, but just watching you grow and um take on leadership, like more and more leadership, has been rewarding to watch.
Cool.
Like, we've grown up together. We're practically, I mean, I've been with you half my life. So,
Yep.
The
better half.
Just keep supporting your spouse. Be there for your kids, and just keep following the path God has for you.
Did my joke not land there?
No. I don't even know what you said.
You said we've been together for half your life, and I said the better half.
Yeah, the better half.
Okay, all right, that's good.
And I'm still just 24 years old.
We did not get together when you were 12.
We got a long way to go.
Anyway, well, I appreciate you being on with me and sharing our story and sharing your story, and I didn't even know some of those things. It's really cool even hearing some of your perspective with all of it. So thank you so much for sharing the spouse side of this whole thing.
No problem.
I hope you found that conversation helpful, maybe just even on a marital level between you and your spouse, and just navigating church ministry. If you're tuning in more to just support the church staff that you have, maybe you just attend a church, I hope it pulled back the veil a little bit to see what might be happening with your pastor and his family, or your church staff member, maybe your ministry director and their family. We want to be encouraging to them as we're encouraging you as a church member. So make sure you're constantly encouraging. It can get very discouraging just because you're carrying the weight of a lot of people. And when they're having downs, you're having downs. And when they're having rough seasons, you're trying to help them navigate it. And sometimes you just need some people that are willing to pour back into you. And we've had such faithful people that have been willing to do that for us. Hopefully you've heard that in our story. If you would like to, if you would comment, you can go to social media, or if you're on YouTube, you can comment just in the comment section. Let us know some of the stories that you've had for feedback. Just what are some of the things that you've had to navigate? It'll also help us talk about, even into the future, some topics to cover, maybe some people that we need to be interviewing and having a conversation with. Always feel free to give that feedback. I would love to connect with other people that I haven't already connected with. If you'd like, subscribe, do all the things, write reviews. It all helps in the algorithms to get us in front of other pastors, in front of other churches, in front of other church members that can help church staff, pastors, and church members just get a little bit healthier, be a little bit more encouraged, get a little bit more equipped about what church life is all about as far as at the top on the church staff level. We want people to get to the finish line that God has put in front of them, and you can be a little just a small part of that if you like, subscribe, comment, do all the things. Thank you so much for checking us out, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.